When you can comfortably read English novels or news articles, no problem.
Hmm.
But the moment you press play on a movie, it's suddenly like, whoa, the actors are speaking this completely different language. Super speed English.
Oh, yeah, that's a classic frustration. A really common sticking point for so many English learners.
It is.
You feel like you've navigated all the tricky grammar. You've built up a pretty good vocabulary list.
Yeah.
But that jump, that leap to understanding, natural spoken English, like in films or TV,
Yeah.
it just feels enormous sometimes.
Like your ears haven't quite caught up with your eyes. That's a good way to put it.
Exactly.
And that's precisely what we're digging into today. Forget, memorizing obscure grammar rules you'll never use or dusty vocabulary lists from ages ago.
Right.
This deep dive is really laser focused on helping you, the intermediate, maybe upper intermediate or advanced learner, get that extra layer of confidence
Yeah.
and really grasp the subtle details,
Yeah.
get that genuine clarity and just become much more aware, more attuned to how native English speakers actually talk.
And our goal today, really, is to give you some concrete strategies, things you can actually use to bridge that listening gap, that auditory gap.
Okay.
We want to help move you from feeling like you're constantly playing catch-up, always hitting rewind,
Mm-hmm.
to a place where understanding, say, the majority of native English speakers feels, well, more natural,
Yeah.
more automatic.
Definitely. And just to be crystal clear about our focus today, we're really concentrating on standard American and standard British English, the kind you hear in most mainstream media, movies, podcasts, news.
The most common ones you'll encounter online or traveling.
Exactly. We're not really venturing into the fascinating, but let's be honest, sometimes bewildering world of highly regional dialects. I mean, those can even chip up native speakers sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. Some dialects are tough even for us.
So if your goal is to enjoy Netflix without constantly staring at the subtitles, or maybe chat more easily with people from London or Los Angeles,
Yeah.
you're in the right audio space. This is for you.
Precisely. We're tackling those core versions of English that are, frankly, the most relevant for most learners and for global communication in general.
Okay, great. So let's unpack this whole thing. Where are these insights coming from today?
Well, they're rooted in someone's personal experience, actually. Someone who really navigated this exact challenge themselves.
Ah, okay. So lived experience.
Yeah, someone who spent years immersed in studying English, the formal way, but still felt that disconnect between reading something and then hearing it spoken.
That gap we talked about.
Exactly. And their journey, it spans over 2 decades.
Yeah.
Like 20 years of consistently listening to and engaging with English media. So I think there are some really valuable perspectives there.
20 years. Wow. Okay, what immediately strikes me about that is the emphasis on the long game, right? It's about the power of consistent effort over a long period.
This isn't about finding some magic bullet or a secret shortcut. It's really about the cumulative effect, how small bits of regular exposure add up. Like you're building this huge auditory library in your brain.
I like that analogy, an auditory library.
Yeah, and the more entries you have, the quicker the recall when you hear something.
Absolutely. And this person, they started learning English around 15, and now they're approaching 40. That's, a significant chunk of life spent actively listening to English media.
That's dedication.
And the key insight they share is that it truly compounds. Like interest in a bank account. Sort of. It can feel incredibly slow at the beginning, maybe even frustrating.
Oh, for sure. Discouraging, even.
Yeah. But sticking with it, making it a consistent habit, that's what delivers the really significant results down the road.
And it's actually kind of reassuring to hear that, isn't it?
Oh.
That even with years of dedicated study, that initial struggle with the speed and the fluidity of spoken English in movies or just everyday chats, it's a shared experience.
Right. It's not just you.
It normalizes the challenge. It makes you feel less alone in it.
Yeah.
And it really underscores how vital perseverance is. Just keep going.
So, yeah, if you've ever felt like your reading skills are just miles ahead of your listening comprehension, you are definitely not alone.
Good to know.
But our source also breaks down some specific linguistic hurdles, the things that often cause these listening snags, these difficulties. And the first big one, vocabulary.
Okay. Vocabulary. But I suspect it's not just about the sheer number of words, is it?
Exactly. It's more about recognizing and understanding the kind of language that often flies under the radar in formal textbooks. We're talking about colloquial language.
Colloquial language.
Yeah.
So the real everyday English that people actually use, not necessarily what you learn in a classroom.
Precisely. Think of it as that authentic, maybe off-the-cuff English you hear on the street or, among friends watching a sitcom. Our source gives a perfect example. Pulling an all-nighter. Now, if you just heard that for the first time, you might try to dissect it literally, right? Pulling, night.
Yeah, it wouldn't make much sense. Pulling what?
Exactly. But it just means staying awake very late, usually because you have to work on something or study. Like,
Yeah.
I had to pull an all-nighter to finish my presentation for work.
Right. Simple meaning,
Yeah.
but the phrase itself isn't obvious. It's efficient, though, and incredibly common. But yeah, definitely not something you'd likely find in a typical grammar lesson.
Not at all.
Another great example they give is that's out of line. Imagine someone saying, his comments during the meeting were completely out of line.
Okay.
Now, if you don't know that out of line means something like inappropriate or unacceptable,
You'd be lost.
you'd miss the core meaning, right? Even if you understood every single other word in that sentence, comments, meeting, completely.
Right. And it's these seemingly small, informal phrases that just pop up constantly, and they can leave you feeling like you're missing crucial bits of context.
Totally. Which leads nicely into the next point, which is about collocations.
Collocations,
Yep.
word partnerships.
Exactly. What's particularly interesting about collocations, I think, is how they show the natural, almost inseparable pairings of words in English. It's not just about whether someone can understand you if you use the wrong word.
Right.
It's about whether you sound natural, whether you sound fluent.
Exactly. Take fast food versus, say, quick food. Now, someone would probably understand what you mean by quick food,
They'd get the idea, yeah?
but it just doesn't sound right, does it? It doesn't resonate as natural English to a native speaker's ear. Fast food is the established collocation. It's the combination that just intuitively fits.
It's baked in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or think about quick shower versus fast shower. Again, fast shower isn't grammatically wrong,
No, the grammar's fine.
but quick shower is just far, far more common. It's the natural pairing.
These more basic examples really illustrate the concept clearly, I think. But the source also points out some more sophisticated collocations that can really be a barrier for intermediate and even upper intermediate learners.
Like what?
Well, consider heightened awareness. You might hear a sentence like, the recent events have led to a heightened awareness of environmental issues.
Okay, heightened awareness.
If you're not familiar with that specific pairing, heightened awareness, understanding that sense of increased sensitivity or, greater understanding, it becomes less clear. You might grasp awareness, but miss the heightened nuance.
Gotcha. It adds a specific flavor. And then there's an expression like bear a grudge. For example, she tends to bear a grudge against people who let her down.
Ooh, that's a good one. Bear a grudge.
Yeah. Now, bear a grudge means like holding on to negative feelings, harboring resentment about something someone did.
Right. Not letting it go.
Exactly. And notice, within that very sentence, she tends to bear a grudge against people who let her down. We also bump into another really common colloquialism, the phrasal verb, let her down.
Ah, yeah. Good catch. Let down, meaning disappoints you.
Right. So to fully understand that one sentence, you actually need to know both the slightly more advanced collocation, bear a grudge, and the very common everyday phrasal verb used informally, let down.
It's like a linguistic domino effect, isn't it?
Totally.
Not recognizing one key phrase can just obscure the meaning of the whole sentence, or at least make it fuzzy. This really drives home the point that effective vocabulary building isn't just about memorizing single words in isolation.
No, it's about the connections.
You have to actively embrace these natural word partnerships, these collocations, and also common idiomatic expressions.
Absolutely. And speaking of word combinations that often have these unique non-literal meanings, let's dive into phrasal verbs, because these are, they're absolutely everywhere in spoken English.
Oh, phrasal verbs, yes. They perfectly illustrate how native speakers often go for concise, action-oriented language. But the tricky part is, their meaning is rarely just a simple sum of the verb and the particle, the little word after it.
So true. Think about brush up on. Someone might say before the interview, she had to brush up on her technical knowledge.
Right. No actual brushing involved.
None at all. It just means to refresh or review knowledge or skills you already have, but maybe haven't used in a while.
Gotcha. Refresh.
Or consider crack down on. You might hear something like, the government is planning to crack down on tax evasion?
Okay, crack down on. Sounds serious.
It does. It means taking strong, severe measures against something. So if you don't know these phrasal verbs, a really significant chunk of the message can just, poof, go right over your head.
The sheer number of phrasal verbs and how often they're used in spoken English makes knowing them pretty much essential for good comprehension. They add that layer of informality and dynamism that's so typical of everyday conversations.
And a lot of the media we consume too, right? TV shows, movies.
Absolutely. Full of them.
Okay, so rounding out this whole vocabulary deep dive, we get to idioms. And these are those wonderfully quirky, sometimes confusing phrases where the literal meaning has almost nothing, zero, to do with what's actually being said.
Yeah, idioms are where that direct word-for-word translation strategy just completely breaks down.
Yeah,
Understanding them often really hinges on knowing the cultural context or just the established figurative meaning. They add so much color and richness to the language.
they do.
But man, they can be incredibly perplexing if you try to take them literally.
Totally. Take the idiom to cut corners. You might hear, they cut corners when building the house, which led to several problems later on.
Okay, cut corners.
This isn't about actually changing the shape of the house, snipping off the corners.
Right, not physically cutting anything.
No. It means they took shortcuts, maybe didn't follow the proper procedures, probably to save time or money, and the result wasn't good.
Got it. Taking shortcuts, doing a sloppy job.
Exactly. Or another one, the ball is in your court. Someone might say, okay, I've given you all the information I have, so now the ball is in your court.
Not literally passing a ball.
Nope. Not a sports commentary, usually. It just means it's now your responsibility to make the next decision or take the next step. It's up to you now.
Truly getting idioms requires, well, memorization often, but also understanding the typical situations where people use them. Because their meaning is so rarely transparent, you really need that repeated exposure and active learning.
So I guess the core message weaving through all of this colloquialisms, collocations, phrasal verbs, idioms, is that building a really robust vocabulary for understanding spoken English isn't just about memorizing endless lists of single words.
Definitely not.
It's fundamentally about grasping the language as it's actually used, getting familiar with colloquial language, becoming really proficient with common collocations, knowing your phrasal verbs inside and out, and understanding the figurative meanings behind common idioms.
Yeah, the broader your active vocabulary is across all these areas, the significantly better equipped you'll be to actually understand what people are saying in real time.
It's about having a practical working understanding, isn't it? Not just theoretical knowledge from a book.
Precisely that, understanding the language as it's authentically spoken.
Okay, so moving on from vocabulary, our source transitions to another really crucial factor, and that's processing speed.
Yes. Processing speed.
It's not just about knowing the words themselves. It's about how rapidly your brain can actually decode them and make sense of them, in real time as someone is speaking.
This is such a critical distinction, I think, because you might have excellent grammar knowledge, maybe a really wide vocabulary on paper.
Right, you ace the tests.
Exactly. But if your cognitive processing, your brain's speed, just can't keep pace with the natural flow of spoken language, your comprehension is inevitably going to suffer. You'll fall behind.
Our source shares observations like seeing adult learners who clearly have a strong grasp of English grammar and vocab when they read or write, but they still struggle significantly with listening purely because their processing speed hasn't caught up yet. And it makes perfect sense when you stop and think about it, doesn't it?
It really does.
When you're reading, you have the luxury of control. You can pause, you can go back, reread a sentence, look up a word you don't know.
Take your time.
Exactly. Spoken language, though, it's just this continuous, relentless stream of sound. It doesn't wait for you.
That relentless moment-by-moment flow of auditory information. That's the central challenge, isn't it? Your brain has to do so many things at once. Decode the sounds, access the right words for your mental dictionary, figure out the grammar, piece together the meaning.
All while the speaker is still talking, delivering more information.
Exactly. It's a high-speed juggling act for the brain.
So the big question is, what practical steps can you take to actually speed up that processing? Our source offers a really tangible exercise here.
Okay, I'm listening. What is it?
Actively listen to English media, like a podcast or a YouTube video, and try to take notes at the same time.
Simultaneous listening and note-taking.
Yeah. And what's apparently so effective about this is that it forces your brain into multitasking mode. You have to actively listen while also identifying and then physically recording key pieces of information.
Right, that act of parallel processing, doing two things at once related to the same input. That's what helps build those neural pathways for faster comprehension. It trains your brain to work more quickly.
The suggestion is maybe start by just jotting down keywords or essential information like names or numbers, maybe interesting facts, or even trying to capture whole sentences as you listen.
So you don't have to get everything down perfectly at first.
No, not at all. And even dedicating just say 5 or 10 minutes each day to this kind of focused activity can apparently yield noticeable improvements over time. And our source even playfully suggests trying it right now with this deep dive.
Huh. Put us to the test. Well, it's an excellent way to actively engage with the material, isn't it? Rather than just passively letting the sound wash over you. You're training your auditory system to filter information, decide what's important, and then process it quickly enough to actually write it down. It's active.
Now, there's a related point here. A lot of us, myself included sometimes, we listen to podcasts or other audio while we're doing other things, right? Like driving or working out at the gym or cooking.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Multitasking listening. Very common.
Very common. And while that kind of passive exposure definitely has its benefits, like just getting generally familiar with the sounds and rhythms of the language,
Sure, it helps.
it's apparently less effective for the specific goal of boosting your processing speed. The recommendation is if you really want to work on speed, try to revisit the recording later when you can give it your full attention. Sit down, listen actively, and take those notes.
That makes sense. Passive listening contributes to overall exposure, helps with familiarization, definitely. But for that specific goal of enhancing processing speed, that focused, intentional practice listening, note-taking, is going to be far more impactful. It's like deliberate cognitive training for your ears.
Right. Targeted training.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've looked at the importance of the right kind of vocabulary and the need for faster processing. The third significant obstacle our source highlights is the phenomenon of connected speech.
Ah, connected speech. This is a big one.
Huge, right. This is where native speakers naturally link words and sounds together, making it this continuous flow. And it's this blending, this linking, that can make even a moderate speaking pace sound incredibly rapid to non-native ears.
Absolutely. Connected speech is just a fundamental characteristic of natural, fluent spoken English. It's driven by things like, well, ease of articulation, making sounds easier to produce quickly, and just the desire for a smooth, uninterrupted flow of sound.
Makes sense.
But it presents a considerable hurdle for learners, especially if you're kind of mentally expecting each individual word to be pronounced super clearly and distinctly like you might see it written down.
Exactly. You're listening for what do you want to do tonight, with neat spaces between words.
Right, like reading aloud slowly.
But the classic example given is that very question. What do you want to do tonight? In natural spoken English, this very often becomes something like, what do you want to do tonight?
Yeah, what do you want to do tonight?
Or even faster sometimes, like, would you want to do tonight? The separate sounds practically melt into each other. What do you? Often gets squished into woulda, or that super quick woulda, and want to do nearly always becomes wanna do.
It's just a series of natural sound changes, reductions, and sometimes omissions that happen when people speak at a normal conversational pace. These aren't mistakes or, sloppy pronunciation.
No, it's not bad English.
Not at all. It is simply the way the language naturally works in its spoken form.
Another very common example they give is, could you hand me that pen? Which often transforms into something like, could you hand me that pen?
But yeah,
That distinct could you just blends right together into could ya, smooths it out.
it makes it faster to say.
Yeah. Similarly, I don't know if he's going to show up frequently sounds more like, I don't know if he's going to show up.
Right. Dunno and gonna. Classic examples.
I don't know. It becomes that quick dunno, and if he is going to, contracts naturally to if he's gonna.
These kinds of contractions, linking, sound reductions, they are incredibly prevalent in everyday speech. So developing the ability to recognize these patterns is absolutely vital.
Why vital?
Because if you're mentally listening for the individual, clearly separated words, like they appear in writing, you'll just struggle to segment the sound stream. You won't be able to easily parse and understand the continuous flow of spoken language you're actually hearing.
Okay, that makes sense. You're listening for the wrong thing. We also have the phrase, let me know when you are ready. What happens to that?
That often becomes, let me know when you're ready.
Let me know when you're ready, right? Let me shortens to let, and you are contracts naturally to your.
Easy peasy.
And finally, a super common one. I have to get up early tomorrow. How does that usually sound?
Often sounds like I have to get up early tomorrow. Yeah, have to often becomes the quicker have to and get up often kind of blends together too, like get up, I have to get up early.
So becoming familiar with these common connected speech patterns, that's really what enables native speakers to understand each other seemingly without effort, right?
Exactly. And for English language learners, it's a critical key. It unlocks the ability to understand faster-paced spoken English, and crucially, it significantly reduces your reliance on needing subtitles all the time.
Right. You start hearing the actual sounds, not just the written words in your head. And our source even makes a point of mentioning um, the availability of a dedicated pronunciation course that really delves into the intricacies of connected speech in much greater detail.
Yeah, and that mention really underscores the fact that understanding these phonetic links, these sound changes, isn't just some helpful extra thing to know.
It's not bonus material.
No, it's a foundational element. It's core to truly improving your listening comprehension, especially for authentic, fast speech.
So, investing time and effort in understanding connected speech is basically a direct investment in your overall listening skill.
Absolutely. It allows you to accurately decode the sounds you are actually hearing, rather than just the idealized separate sounds you might expect to hear based on how the language is written.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Now, before we dive into more practical tips for improvement, our source raises a really important point, almost like a crucial caveat or a reality check.
What's that?
While striving to understand native speakers is a common and totally valid goal, especially for media consumption, it's vital not to focus exclusively on native speakers.
Ah, okay. That's a really important shift in perspective for a lot of learners, I think. Because the aspiration is often, I want to understand native speakers perfectly.
Right, that's seen as the ultimate goal.
But it's crucial to acknowledge the actual global landscape of how English is used today.
The statistics here are pretty eye-opening. According to data from Ethnologue, I think it was the 2024 data, there are approximately 380 million native English speakers worldwide.
Okay, 380 million. Seems like a lot.
It does. But then the estimated number of non-native English speakers, people who use English as a second or additional language in
Yeah.
L2, it's around 1.1 billion.
Wow. Okay, 380 million native versus 1.1 billion non-native. That's a huge difference.
It really is. 3 times as many, roughly.
So that highlights that in many real-world communication situations you might find yourself in, whether it's at work, in an international company, or just traveling,
Yeah.
you are statistically much more likely to be communicating in English with someone who is not a native speaker of the language.
That's a fascinating point. So, while understanding native speakers is definitely important, especially if you want to enjoy English language media like films, TV shows, podcasts, because let's face it, a lot of that content is still produced by native speakers.
Sure. For media consumption, it's key.
It's definitely not the complete picture of global English communication today, not by a long shot.
Exactly. Your actual day-to-day interactions, depending on your life and work, might involve a much, much broader spectrum of accents and individual speaking styles from all over the world.
Which naturally leads us to this concept of English as a lingua franca.
Right. The bridge language.
As our source explains it, a lingua franca is essentially a language that gets adopted as a common way to communicate between people whose native languages are different.
Okay.
It acts like a linguistic bridge, basically. It facilitates interactions in areas like international trade, travel, science, business, intercultural stuff.
Makes sense. A common ground.
And a key characteristic of a lingua franca is that it's not necessarily the native language of everyone using it. Often, most people using it are non-native speakers.
Okay. Can you think of historical examples?
Sure. Historically, things like French in diplomacy, or Latin in scholarship, or Arabic in trade across certain regions, they all served as lingua francas at different times and places. And today, English has really evolved into the dominant global lingua franca. It's the primary language used for international business deals, diplomacy, scientific research papers, aviation control towers, academic conferences, and so much online interaction.
It's everywhere.
Pretty much. And the really crucial point here, connecting back to the statistics, is that the vast majority of English language conversations taking place around the globe actually occur between non-native speakers.
Right. Not native to native or even native to non-native necessarily, but non-native to non-native.
Exactly. Our source gives a compelling example. Imagine, say, a scientist from Japan and a scientist from Italy meeting at an international conference in, I don't know, Germany.
Okay.
Their primary shared language for discussing their research is almost certainly going to be English, even though it's the first language for neither of them.
That paints a clear picture. And this reality really underscores the importance of developing a Adaptability in your listening skills.
Adaptability. Good word.
Yeah, being open to and comfortable with a whole variety of accents and speaking styles. So, while the main focus of our deep dive today is on helping you better understand native speakers, particularly for media,
Which is a valid goal.
totally valid. We
Yeah.
definitely shouldn't overlook the immense value of also getting exposure to non-native English speakers and how they use the language.
And on that very note, actually, our source specifically highlights the private online community as a fantastic place for exactly this kind of exposure.
Oh, the community.
Yeah, it offers this unique chance to listen to and actually interact with non-native English speakers from a really diverse range of countries, places like Brazil, Italy, Poland, China, Japan, Mexico, many others.
So you get to hear all these different flavors of English.
Exactly. And immersing yourself, even just listening to those different accents and ways of phrasing things, can be an incredibly enriching and, frankly, really valuable experience for becoming a better global communicator.
It broadens your overall understanding of how English actually functions out there in the world.
Hmm.
And ultimately, it helps you become a more versatile, more confident listener and speaker in a truly international context.
Mm.
That's where most English use happens.
Okay, fantastic point. So, quick recap. We've identified the key obstacles, tricky vocabulary types, processing speed, connected speech, and we've got that important reality check about global English use.
Right. Setting the stage.
Now get down to the really practical advice,
Yeah.
the actionable tips. How can you actually improve your ability to understand native English speakers? The very first one is maybe obvious, but it's absolutely fundamental.
Let's hear it.
Listen. Just listen. Listen consistently, listen actively, and listen a lot.
Okay, listen. It sounds simple, but regular, consistent exposure to English audio is completely non-negotiable. It's a foundation.
Bedrock, yeah.
It really serves as the bedrock upon which all your other listening skills have to be built. Without that regular auditory input, trying to make significant improvement is going to be incredibly challenging. Almost impossible, I'd say.
And when we say listen, our source is specifically talking about making a conscious effort to listen to native speakers for this particular goal through things like podcasts like this one, YouTube videos, music you like, movies, TV series.
All that media we talked about.
Exactly. And ideally, this should become a daily habit, something woven into your routine, even if it's just for a short time each day.
Daily engagement, even brief, with the actual sounds of native English. It trains your ear. It helps you recognize the natural rhythms, the intonation patterns, those subtle sound variations.
Right, the music of the language.
Exactly. And it also continuously reinforces your vocabulary and your understanding of grammar. But in a listening context, not just on paper. It's about really immersing yourself in the sonic landscape of English.
Okay, so tip #1, listen daily. Got it. What's the second crucial tip?
The second tip is to pick a specific variation of English, say either standard American English or standard British English, maybe received pronunciation, RP, and initially try to focus your listening efforts primarily on that one variation.
Okay, so choose a target accent to start with.
Yeah. Our source shares their own experience, mentioning they used American English as their primary reference point when they were really focusing on improving.
Why is that helpful? Why focus?
Well, choosing a standard variation to begin with gives you a consistent, reliable model to learn from. It lets you build a solid foundation in the core sounds, the pronunciation patterns of that specific accent, before you start trying to navigate all the complex nuances of different regional variations.
Ah, okay. Master the basics of one first.
Kind of. Once you've developed a comfortable level of understanding with your chosen reference accent, you feel pretty good listening to standard American, for instance, then you can gradually start branching out.
Branching out how?
Start exposing yourself more to other native English accents,
Right.
maybe Australian, Irish, Scottish, South African, etc. Having that initial standard reference point actually helps you understand the others better.
How so?
You can hear how they differ from your reference point. You have a baseline for comparison. It makes the variations seem less random and confusing.
Gotcha. It's a strategic approach. Establish a strong understanding of a core accent first, build a framework.
Exactly. And that framework makes it easier to decode and comprehend other variations later on. Think of it like learning the main highways on a map really well before you start exploring all the smaller country roads.
Okay, that makes sense. Focus first, then broaden. Tip #3 might be a bit tougher for some people, though.
Oh, what is it?
Our source strongly recommends making a conscious effort to reduce or maybe even completely eliminate your consumption of media in your native language, at least for a specific period of time.
Wow. Okay, cut out native language media. That is challenging. Why?
It's all about creating a more immersive linguistic environment for yourself. By deliberately cutting down on your native language input, you essentially force yourself to engage more actively with English. You maximize your exposure.
Total immersion, basically.
Kind of, yeah. The suggestion is maybe aim for a set period, could be 6 months, a year, maybe even 2 years if you're really serious,
Right.
where you primarily consume English language media. Movies, music, news, YouTube, books. Everything in English if possible.
That's intense.
It is. The idea behind it is to cultivate this near obsession with the language to really saturate your brain. Now, crucially, they add that after your English listening skills have stabilized, become more solid,
Then it's okay to go back.
yeah, then you can absolutely choose to return to enjoying media in your native language again. But for that initial intensive improvement phase, this kind of focused immersion can be incredibly effective.
That's like a form of linguistic fasting, maybe?
Ooh, I like that. Linguistic fasting.
You temporarily cut out the easy input of your native language to really allow English to take root and flourish in your auditory system. Definitely requires commitment, though.
Big commitment, but potentially big rewards in listening comprehension.
True.
Okay, the next two tips are closely related. They kind of go hand in hand.
All right.
First, make a point of consuming a diverse range of English language media formats. And second, ensure you're listening to content on a variety of different topics.
Okay, variety in format and variety in topic. Makes sense. Why is variety in format important?
Well, different formats challenge your listening skills in slightly different ways, right? YouTube videos often give you visual cues, which can help.
Context.
Podcasts, like this, rely purely on audio comprehension. Movies and TV series give you narrative context and dialogue. Audiobooks help build sustained listening stamina over longer periods. News broadcasts expose you to more formal language and different delivery styles.
So mixing it up trains different facets of your listening ability and variety in topic.
This is maybe even more important for motivation. Our source strongly advises starting with subjects that genuinely interest you, things you actually want to learn about or enjoy.
Makes learning less of a chore.
Exactly. They share their own interests: movies, music, rock and roll specifically, psychology, education, tech. And they naturally sought out English content about those things. The advice is make a list of your favorite topics, things you're passionate about, and then actively look for English podcasts, videos, articles related to them.
Yeah, that's great advice. When you're genuinely interested in the subject, you're naturally more motivated to pay attention, to stick with it, even when it gets a bit difficult.
Right, you want to understand.
And it also helps you build topic-specific vocabulary in a much more organic and memorable way because you're learning it in a context you care about.
Okay, next valuable tip. This one focuses on how you listen. Specifically, actively practice listening for the overall gist or the main idea,
Okay, listening for gist.
as distinct from listening specifically for detailed facts or specific information. Okay. So distinguishing between listening for the big picture versus listening for the tiny details, two different skills.
Exactly. They're both important, but they're different. Listening for gist is about grasping the central theme, the overall message, without stressing about understanding every single word.
Getting the main point.
Yeah. You can practice this by listening to maybe a short chunk of audio, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, and then just pausing and trying to summarize, even in one sentence, what the main point was. What was that mostly about?
Okay, simple gist check.
Conversely, listening for specific information is when you do need to focus on particular details, maybe someone's name, a phone number, a date, a specific statistic mentioned.
Like listening to directions or catching flight details.
Exactly. You need to pinpoint those specific pieces of information accurately. Developing proficiency in both of these listening modes, gist and specific info, makes you a much more versatile and effective listener overall. Makes sense. Sometimes you need the overview, sometimes you need the detail. Consciously practicing both will definitely enhance your comprehension abilities across different situations.
Okay, now for learners who are a bit further along, maybe reached a solid intermediate or advanced level, say, around B2 or C1 on that European scale.
Okay, for the more advanced folks.
Our source recommends a more demanding but apparently highly effective practice technique: listening and writing verbatim.
Verbatim, meaning word for word.
Exactly. Trying to write down every single word that you hear, precisely as it's spoken.
Whoa. Okay, that sounds challenging. Verbatim transcription.
It does, but it's described as an exceptionally powerful exercise for really sharpening your listening precision and your overall accuracy. It forces you, compels you to pay incredibly close attention to every single word, every little nuance of pronunciation, every subtle sound, every contraction.
You can't drift off mentally at all.
Not for a second. And they even suggest, again, using our current deep dive as practice material for this technique.
Putting us under the microscope again.
Right. And they make the point that while many listeners might be able to follow the general gist of our conversation, get the main ideas, hopefully, they would likely find it considerably more difficult, maybe even impossible at first, to accurately transcribe every single word we're saying, including all the ums and uhs and overlaps.
Yeah, that really highlights the gap that can exist between just general understanding, I get what they're talking about, and the kind of super detailed auditory processing needed for accurate verbatim transcription.
So by actively attempting to transcribe word for word, you become much more acutely aware of all those things we're talked about. Connected speech, subtle sound variations, intonation, everything. It really fine-tunes your ear.
Intense, but I can see how that would boost accuracy significantly.
Definitely seems like a powerful tool for advanced learners. Okay, and finally, the last tip, but certainly not the least important, maybe the most important in some ways.
What is it?
Be patient. Be patient with yourself.
Patience. The hardest one sometimes.
Isn't it just? Improving your listening comprehension skills, especially to a high level, it's a journey that just takes time. Pure and simple. There are genuinely no quick fixes, no overnight solutions, despite what some people might promise.
It's a gradual process, isn't it? You're consistently training your ears, training your brain to effectively process this complex system of sounds that is English.
Our source uses that great comparison. It's like training for a marathon, not trying to win a 100-meter sprint.
Good analogy. Steady persistence wins.
Exactly. Think about it. You didn't learn to understand your native language fluently overnight, did you? It took years of constant exposure as a child. And learning a second language as an adult, well, it works in a similar way. Your brain needs adequate time to build those new neural pathways, to get used to recognizing the sounds, understanding the patterns, processing it all efficiently.
And there will absolutely be days, maybe even weeks, where you feel like you're stuck, like you're not making any progress at all, hitting that plateau.
Oh yeah, the plateau is real.
But the key is those consistent minutes of daily practice, even when they feel unproductive, they are working. They're doing their job behind the scenes, even if you don't immediately see or feel the results.
That feeling of stagnation, hitting a plateau, it's a perfectly normal part of learning anything complex, but consistency is the antidote. Keep showing up.
Because even when you don't feel that sudden breakthrough, your brain is still absorbing, processing, making connections. And that pivotal unlocking moment, when things suddenly just click, start to sound clearer, and you realize you've taken a significant leap in understanding.
Yeah.
It will eventually come, but only with that sustained, patient effort.
So ultimately, the people who really achieve fluency in understanding spoken English, they aren't necessarily the ones who are like the most naturally gifted linguistically or the most intelligent.
No.
They're the ones who remain consistent. They stick with it day in, day out, and they exercise patience throughout the whole process, especially during the tough patches.
Patience and persistence.
Exactly. Try to imagine your future self, maybe a year or two from now, effortlessly and confidently understanding English, watching movies without stress, chatting easily, no constant straining to hear, no subtitles needed. Imagine that feeling.
That's the goal.
That future version of you is going to be incredibly grateful to your present self for starting this journey and, crucially, for sticking with it, even when it felt hard.
That's a powerful motivator. So the practical advice boiling down from all this is maybe pick just one or two techniques from everything we've discussed today, something that resonates with you.
Just start small.
Yeah, and consciously practice it this week. And pay attention to even the smallest improvements you notice. Don't dismiss them. Remember that every single minute you spend actively listening is bringing you closer to your goal.
That's a great, actionable takeaway. Choose one thing and start. And with that encouraging thought, we're now going to move into our Learner's Corner segment.
Okay.
We received a really lovely email here from Roland, who's listening in Budapest, Hungary.
Ah, Roland from Budapest. Hello.
Roland shares that he restarted learning English about 3 months ago. He'd studied it before, but like 20 years ago in school.
Wow, restarting after a long break.
It is. And I think the big takeaway from that kind of long-term experience is how improvement happens. It's gradual.
Yeah, not overnight.
Definitely not. It compounds, like interest in the bank, little bits add up over time, but you need that consistent effort.
That makes sense. So this person started English at 15, now they're nearly 40.
Oh,
That's a long stretch of just listening.
listening, watching, engaging. And the key is that cumulative effect. It can feel really hard at the start, like you're hitting a wall.
Oh, I bet, yeah.
But sticking with it, that consistency, that's what makes the real difference in the long run.
So it's kind of reassuring then that even someone who studied a lot still found movies and stuff hard initially.
Yeah, absolutely. It normalizes the struggle, I think. It shows it's not just you, it's part of the process. And it really highlights why perseverance is so important.
Okay, so if you're listening and thinking, yes, that's me, I read fine, but movies are impossible,
Yes.
you're not alone.
Not at all.
But okay, let's break it down. What are the specific hurdles? The source mentions a few key obstacles. The first one is vocabulary.
Right. And crucially, it's not just about how many words you know.
Ah, okay. What then?
It's about the types of words. Specifically, the kind of language that doesn't always show up in textbooks. And we're talking colloquial language.
Colloquial.
Yeah.
Like everyday chat, slang.
Sort of. It's
Yeah.
the real, informal English people use naturally, stuff that might not be in your grammar book. The key insight here is that this is the language of real life, beyond the classroom.
Gotcha. Can you give an example?
Sure. The source uses pulling an all-nighter.
Okay, pulling an all-nighter.
Now, if you only know formal English, you might try to picture someone literally pulling something all night.
Yeah, makes no sense.
Exactly. But it just means staying up very late, usually working or studying. Like, I had to pull an all-nighter to finish that presentation.
Ah, okay, so staying up all night working. Got it.
It's common, it's efficient, but yeah, probably not in chapter 1 of your textbook.
Right.
Another one they give is that's out of line.
Out of line.
Yeah, like his comments in the meeting were totally out of line. If you don't know out of line means inappropriate or unacceptable.
You'd miss the point.
Yeah,
Even if you knew out and line.
precisely. You'd miss the disapproval, the criticism. So understanding these colloquial bits is vital for getting the full picture in everyday talk.
It's these little phrases that pop up all the time and can just derail your understanding, can't they?
They really can. And then connected to this is the idea of collocations.
Collocations,
Yeah.
words that just kind of belong together.
Exactly. Word partnerships. It's fascinating because it's not just about being understood, it's about sounding natural.
Yeah.
The key insight with collocations is they show how words naturally combine in English. Getting them right makes you sound much more fluent.
Give me an example.
Okay, think about fast food. You'd say quick food, and people would probably understand you.
But it sounds a bit weird.
It sounds a bit off, yeah.
Mm.
Unnatural. Fast food is the standard collocation. Same idea with, say, quick shower.
Versus fast shower.
Right. Again, fast shower isn't wrong grammatically, maybe, but quick shower is just what people normally say. It's the common pairing.
So it's about these fixed combinations.
It is. And while those are fairly simple examples, the source mentions more advanced ones that can be real barriers for, intermediate or higher level learners.
Like what?
Like heightened awareness.
Okay, heightened awareness.
You might hear something like, recent events led to a heightened awareness of environmental issues.
Meaning people are more aware.
Exactly, a greater level of awareness. But if you haven't encountered that specific pairing, heightened awareness, it might take you a second longer to process, or you might not grasp the full intensity.
Right. And another one.
Bear a grudge.
Ooh, okay, bear a grudge.
Example, she tends to bear a grudge against people who let her down.
So bear a grudge means hold on to negative feelings. Resentment.
Precisely, to harbor resentment. And notice, even in that example sentence,
Yeah.
you have let her down.
Ah, another one. Means disappoint her.
Right. Which is itself a really common phrasal verb used colloquially. So in one sentence, you've got a more advanced collocation, bear a grudge, and a common phrasal verb, let down.
Wow. Yeah. Layers.
Exactly. If you don't know either of those, the sentence becomes much harder to understand fully. It really shows you need to learn vocabulary in these chunks, these combinations, not just isolated words.
It really drives home that point about needing more than just single word definitions.
Absolutely. It's about the context, the pairings, the common usage.
Which brings us neatly to phrasal verbs. You just
Yeah.
mentioned one. These are everywhere in spoken English, aren't they?
Oh, everywhere. They're a huge part of sounding natural and understanding informal speech. But Yeah, their meaning often isn't obvious from the verb and the little particle word alone.
Right.
The insight here is that because they're so frequent, you just have to learn them for good comprehension, even if they seem illogical sometimes.
Okay, examples.
Sure. How about blush up on?
Brush up on, like with a brush.
Hey, no, not literally.
Yep.
It means to refresh your knowledge or skill in something you haven't used for a while. Before the interview, she had to brush up on her technical knowledge.
Okay, review or refresh. Got it. Another one.
Cracked down on.
Crack down on. Sounds serious.
It is. It means to take severe or stricter measures against something negative. The government plans to crack down on tax evasion.
Right. So getting tough on it.
Exactly. And if you don't know these, again, you're missing big chunks of meaning in everyday conversations, news reports, everywhere.
The sheer number of them can feel overwhelming, I think.
It can seem that way, but you start with the most common ones. Their frequency makes them unavoidable, really. They add that dynamic, informal flavor to spoken English.
Okay. And the last piece of this vocabulary puzzle, according to the source, is idioms.
Ah, idioms. The really colorful, sometimes bizarre phrases.
Where the literal meaning is just completely useless.
Pretty much. They have a figurative meaning that you just have to learn. Often they're tied to culture or history. The key takeaway is you can't figure them out just by knowing the words. You have to learn the specific figurative meaning.
Okay, classic examples.
How about to cut corners?
Cut corners.
You might hear, they cut corners when building the house, and now there are problems.
So not literally snipping the corners of the building?
Definitely not. It means they took shortcuts, maybe used cheaper materials, didn't follow the proper procedures, probably to save time or money.
Right, doing a shoddy job, basically.
Kind of, yeah. Or how about the ball is in your court?
Okay, sounds like sports. Tennis.
Metaphorically, yes. If someone says, I've given you all the information, so now the ball is in your court, it means...
It's my turn to act, my decision.
Exactly. It's up to you to make the next move or decision. Not about sports at all.
So with idioms, it's pure memorization and understanding the context where they're used.
Pretty much. Because they're so opaque, you need exposure and deliberate learning. You need to see them or hear them used a few times to really get them.
Okay. So wrapping up this whole vocabulary section, the big picture is it's not just about cramming lists of words.
Not at all.
It's about understanding that informal colloquial language, getting the hang of collocations so you know which words naturally go together,
Right.
learning those super common phrasal verbs, and figuring out the figurative meanings of idioms.
Exactly. It's about building a wider, more practical range across all these areas. The more you have, the better your odds of understanding what you hear.
It's about understanding the language as it's actually spoken day to day.
That's the core of it, not just the formal written version.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Now, the source moves on to another really interesting obstacle, processing speed.
Ah, yes. This is huge.
It's not just what you know, but how fast your brain can handle it in real time.
Precisely. You could have amazing grammar and vocabulary on paper,
Right.
but if your brain can't keep up with the speed of spoken language, you'll still struggle to understand. The insight here is you need to actively train your brain to process faster. It doesn't just happen.
And the source mentions seeing this with adult students, right? People who test well on grammar know lots of words,
Yeah.
but listening comprehension is still a major weak spot. Why? Because their processing is too slow.
Exactly. And it makes total sense if you think about reading versus listening.
How so?
Well, when you read, you control the pace, don't you?
Yeah, I can stop, reread a sentence, look up a word.
Right. You have that luxury of time, but spoken language,
Yeah.
he's coming. It doesn't wait for you.
It's relentless, like a constant stream.
It is. Your brain is doing so much at once, decoding sounds, finding words in your memory, figuring out the grammar, piecing together the meaning, all while more sound is arriving.
Wow, yeah, it's a heavy cognitive load.
Very demanding. So the question is, how do you actually improve that speed? How do you train your brain?
Okay, what's the suggestion?
The source offers a really practical exercise. Listen to English, maybe a podcast or a video, and try to take notes at the same time.
Listen and write simultaneously. Sounds tricky.
It is tricky, but that's the point. It forces your brain to multitask, to listen actively and at the same time, identify and jot down key information.
Okay.
That simultaneous processing is what builds speed and efficiency over time.
So what kind of notes should you take, like full sentences?
You can start simpler, maybe just keywords, or important facts, names, dates, interesting points that stand out. Or, yes, if you can manage it, try writing down whole sentences you hear.
And how often?
Even just 5 or 10 minutes of focused practice like this each day can start making a real difference. The source even cheekily suggests trying it right now with this deep dive.
Okay, challenge accepted, maybe?
Yeah.
So actively engaging, not just passively listening.
Exactly. You're forcing your brain to work harder, to filter and process much more actively than if you were just letting the sound wash over you.
That brings up a good point. A lot of us listen to podcasts or music while, driving or at the gym or doing chores.
Very common.
Is that still helpful?
Oh, it's definitely still beneficial. That kind of passive exposure is great for getting familiar with the sounds, the rhythm, reinforcing things you already know. But for specifically targeting and improving your processing speed, it's less effective than focused active listening with note-taking.
Okay.
So maybe listen passively while you're busy, but then perhaps revisit a short segment later when you can actually sit down, concentrate, and do the note-taking exercise.
So passive listening has its place, but for speed, you need that focused effort.
Precisely. It's about deliberately training that specific skill of rapid, simultaneous processing.
Okay, that's a really concrete technique people can try. So we've covered vocabulary issues and processing speed. What's the third big obstacle the source identifies?
Connected speech.
The way native speakers kind of smush words together.
That's a good way to put it, yes. How words and sounds link up, blend, and sometimes even change or disappear in natural fluent speech.
And this can make things sound incredibly fast, even if the speaker isn't actually talking that quickly.
Absolutely. It's a major reason why spoken English can sound so different from how learners expect it to sound based on reading individual words. The key insight is understanding these patterns is crucial for comprehension and helps you rely less on subtitles.
Okay, let's break this down with examples. The classic one is, what do you want to do tonight?
Right. How does that often sound?
More like, what do you want to do tonight? Or even faster, like, what do you want to do tonight?
Exactly. It almost becomes one long flowing sound. What do you melt into wadaye or wuju, and want to famously becomes wanna.
It's amazing how much disappears.
It is. But it's natural. It's about ease of articulation, smooth flow. These aren't mistakes. It's just how spoken English works.
Okay, another example
How about, could you hand me that pen?
becomes, could you hand me that pen?
Perfect. Could you? Merges into that softer kuja sound. Very common.
And I don't know if he's going to show up.
Often sounds like.
I don't know if he's going to show up.
Exactly. I don't know becomes dunno, and is going to becomes a super common gonna, or sometimes just if he's gonna.
These reductions are everywhere, aren't they?
Absolutely everywhere. And if you're listening for I do not know if he is going to, well, you're going to miss it because that's often not what the speaker actually produces.
We need to recognize dunno and gonna as units.
Precisely. You need to be familiar with these compressed forms. How about, let me know when you're ready?
We know when you're ready.
Yep. Let me becomes, let me, you are, contracts to your, smooth and quick.
And one more.
I have to get up early tomorrow.
I have to get up early tomorrow.
Right. Have to often becomes hafta, especially before consonant sounds. And get up often blends together to get up.
So becoming familiar with these patterns is key to unlocking understanding, especially at faster speeds.
It's absolutely fundamental. It allows you to segment the speech stream correctly. It's how native speakers understand each other so easily. And it really helps reduce that dependence on seeing the words written down, like with subtitles.
Which is the goal for many learners, right? To watch without subtitles.
Exactly. And the source even points out there are courses specifically focused on pronunciation and connected speech, which really underlines how important this aspect is. It's not just a minor detail.
So worth investing time in understanding how sounds link and change.
Definitely. It helps you hear what's actually being said, not just what you expect to hear based on the written word.
Okay, this is all really helpful. Now, before we dive into the practical tips for improving, the source makes a really important point, almost like a caveat.
Ah, yes, a crucial perspective shift.
It's about not focusing exclusively on understanding only native English speakers.
Right. This is something many learners might overlook, but it's incredibly relevant in today's world. Why is understanding native speakers often the main goal?
Well, I guess because a lot of the media, movies, music, popular podcasts is produced by native speakers. And maybe it's seen as the standard.
That's certainly part of it, but we need to look at the bigger picture of how English is actually used globally.
Okay.
The statistics are quite eye-opening. According to Ethnologue data from 2024, there are roughly 380 million native English speakers.
Okay, quite a lot.
But
Yeah.
there are around 1.1 billion non-native English speakers, people using English as a second or additional language.
Wow, 1.1 billion. That's almost 3 times as many.
Exactly. A huge difference. And what that means is, in many real-world situations, work, travel, international conferences.
You're actually more likely to speak English with another non-native speaker.
Statistically, yes. Very likely. So while understanding native speakers is important, especially for media consumption,
Because they still produce most of it.
right, it's definitely not the only important listening skill you need in the modern world.
Okay.
Your everyday English interactions might involve a huge variety of accents and styles, not just British or American, which leads to the concept of English as a lingua franca.
Lingua franca, a common language.
Exactly, a language used for communication between people who don't share a native tongue. It's a bridge. Think trade, travel, science, business.
Okay.
And the key thing is, the lingua franca isn't necessarily anyone's first language in that conversation. Historically, you had languages like French, Latin, Arabic, serving this role in different places and times.
And now it's English.
Overwhelmingly, yes. English is the global lingua franca for international business, science, diplomacy, aviation, academia, the internet, you name it.
And the crucial point is,
The vast majority of English conversations happening worldwide today are actually between non-native speakers.
right, like the example the source gives. A Japanese scientist and an Italian scientist at a conference.
Perfect example. They're likely communicating in English, even though it's L2 for both of them.
So the big caveat is, yes, work on understanding native speakers,
Yeah.
especially for media, but don't neglect getting used to non-native accents.
Absolutely. You need adaptability. You need to be open to understanding English spoken in many different ways. It makes you a more effective global communicator.
And the source actually mentions their private community as a good place for that.
Yeah, as an opportunity to hear and interact with learners from all over Brazil, Italy, Poland, China, Japan, Mexico. Lots of different accents in one place.
That sounds like a really enriching experience, actually, hearing how English sounds around the world.
It really broadens your perspective and makes you a more versatile listener and speaker.
Okay, that's a really important perspective check. So we've looked at the obstacles, vocabulary nuances, processing speed, connected speech, and we've got the lingua franca context. Now, let's get practical. What are the top tips for actually improving your understanding of native speakers?
All right, let's dive in. Tip number 1, and it might sound almost too simple, but it's the absolute foundation.
Which is?
Listen. Listen, listen, and listen some more. Consistently. Regularly. Often.
Just sheer volume of listening.
It's non-negotiable, really. If you want to get good at understanding spoken English, you have to spend time listening to it. It's the bedrock. Without regular, sustained listening, improvement is just incredibly difficult.
And we're talking specifically listening to native speakers here.
Yeah.
Podcasts, YouTube, music, movies, TV.
Yes, for this specific goal, make it a habit. Ideally, find ways to listen every single day, even if it's just for a short while.
Why is that daily exposure so key?
It trains your ear. You get used to the natural rhythms, the intonation, the stress patterns. It reinforces vocabulary and grammar, but in an auditory context. It's about immersing yourself in the sound of the language.
Okay, listen consistently. Got it. Tip number 2.
Pick a variation in focus, at least initially.
Meaning choose American English or British English.
Yeah, or specifically received pronunciation within British English, perhaps. Choose one standard, widely understood accent as your main reference point. The source mentions their own focus was primarily American English starting out.
Why is that helpful? Why not just listen to everything?
It gives you a consistent model to learn from first. You build a solid understanding of the core sounds and patterns of one main accent. It's like learning the rules before you learn the exceptions.
Okay, so get comfortable with, say, standard American.
And then once you feel pretty confident with that, start branching out. Expose yourself to Australian, Irish, Scottish, other accents.
And having that first standard reference helps you notice the differences in the others.
Exactly. You have a baseline. It makes understanding the variations much easier. It's a strategic way to approach it, to build a strong foundation first. Like learning main roads before exploring side streets.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, tip number 3. This one sounds potentially challenging.
Ah, yes. This one requires some commitment. The advice is to try and significantly reduce or even temporarily eliminate consuming media in your native language.
Whoa. cut out movies and music in my own language. For how long?
The suggestion is maybe for a defined period, like a year or two, while you're intensely focused on improving your English listening. Try to make English your primary source for movies, music, news, everything.
Why? What's the logic?
It's about creating maximum immersion. You force yourself to engage with English much more frequently and actively. It helps create, as the source puts it, a kind of obsession with the language.
It's an English bubble.
Essentially, yes. A self-created immersion environment. The idea is, once your listening skills are much stronger and more stable, you can absolutely go back to enjoying media in your native language. But for that focused improvement phase, going all in on English can really accelerate progress.
That takes discipline, but I can see how it would work. You're basically removing the easier option.
Exactly. You're forcing your brain to rely solely on English for that auditory input and entertainment. It allows English to really take hold in your auditory system. Big commitment, potentially big results.
Okay, interesting. What's next?
The next two tips focus on variety. Tip 4, consume a variety of media types.
So don't just listen to podcasts.
Right, mix it up. Listen to podcasts, watch YouTube videos, enjoy movies and TV series, try audiobooks, watch TED Talks, listen to news broadcasts.
Why variety and format?
Because each format offers something slightly different. YouTube has visuals. Podcasts are pure audio. Movies have narrative context and dialogue. Audiobooks build listening stamina. News uses more formal language. You encounter different speaking styles, vocabulary, and contexts.
Okay, variety of media. And tip 5.
Variety of topics.
Okay. So don't just listen to stuff about, I don't know, football.
Unless you only want to understand English about football.
Yeah.
No, the advice is to start with topics you're genuinely interested in. What do you love? What are your hobbies, your professional interests?
Right. The source mentioned their interests were movies, music, psychology, tech.
Exactly. So they sought out English content on those things. The tip is, make a list of your favorite topics, then actively look for English podcasts, videos, articles, whatever, about those subjects.
Why is listening to stuff you like so important?
Motivation. If you're interested in the content, you'll naturally pay more attention, you'll be more willing to push through tricky bits, and you'll learn topic-specific vocabulary much more naturally and enjoyably. Makes the whole process less of a chore.
Listen to what you love in English. Simple but effective. Okay, what's the next tip?
This one is about how you listen. Practice listening for gist versus listening for specific information.
Okay, 2 different modes of listening.
Exactly. Listening for gist means focusing on the main idea, the overall message. Don't worry if you miss individual words. Just try to get the big picture.
How can you practice that?
Listen to a short chunk of audio, maybe 2 to 5 minutes, and then stop and try to summarize the main point in your own words. What was that basically about?
Okay, grasp the main idea. And the other mode, listening for specifics.
That's zooming in, focusing on catching details like names, numbers, dates, places, specific facts.
Like listening for flight information at an airport.
Perfect example. Or catching the key statistics in a news report. Developing both skills, understanding the overview, and picking out details makes you a much more flexible and effective listener overall.
So consciously practice both ways of listening sometimes.
Right. Know why you're listening in that moment, for the big picture or for the small details.
Got it. Now, there's a more advanced practice technique mentioned too.
Yes, for learners who are already at a pretty good level, say B2 or C1, it's listening and writing verbatim.
Verbatim, meaning word for word.
Exactly. Trying to write down every single word you hear, precisely as it's spoken.
Wow, that sounds incredibly difficult.
It is. But it's a powerful exercise for honing your listening precision and accuracy. It forces you to notice every little sound, every connected speech link, every subtle pronunciation.
And the source again suggests using this deep dive for practice.
They do, pointing out that while many might follow the general discussion,
Yeah.
actually transcribing us word for word would be a real challenge for most non-native listeners.
I believe it.
It highlights the gap between understanding the general meaning and processing every single auditory detail accurately. Trying to transcribe verbatim makes you super aware of those connected speech features and nuances you might otherwise ignore.
Okay, a tough workout for the ears for advanced learners. And the final tip.
The final tip is perhaps the most important, especially for maintaining motivation. Be patient.
Easier said than done sometimes.
Isn't it just? But improving listening skills takes time. There are no magic shortcuts. It's a gradual process of training your ear and brain. Consistency and patience are key.
The source compares it to a marathon, not a sprint.
A perfect analogy. You didn't learn to understand your native language instantly. English is the same. Your brain needs time and repeated exposure to build those new neural pathways for sounds and patterns.
So those days when you feel like you're stuck, not making progress.
Totally normal. Everyone feels that. But the key is to remember that even if you don't feel the progress, that daily practice is still working away behind the scenes in your brain. Keep going.
And eventually you might have that unlocking moment.
Exactly. Many students report that feeling suddenly things just click and they realize they're understanding much more clearly. It often comes after a period of consistent effort, even if progress felt slow.
So it's not about being the smartest, but about being the most consistent and patient.
That's often the case, yes. Persistence pays off. And the source encourages listeners to imagine their future selves understanding English confidently, without stress, without needing subtitles.
Yeah,
That future you will be so grateful to the present you for putting in the work now.
that's a nice way to think about it. Start now for a future you.
So the practical advice is, pick one or two techniques we've discussed today. Try practicing them this week. Notice the small wins. Every minute counts.
Okay, fantastic. That's a wealth of information and practical advice. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And with that, let's move into our Learner's Corner. We received a really nice email from Roland, who's listening in Budapest, Hungary.
Oh, wonderful. Hello, Roland.
Well, Roland shares that he restarted learning English about 3 months ago. He'd studied it before, like 20 years ago in school.
Wow, restarting after a long break. That takes courage.
Yeah. And he's also a member of the Hungarian national wheelchair basketball team since 2014, which is amazing.
That's incredible. Wow.
So his sport involves travel and using some English already. He currently has a teacher every couple of weeks, and he says he listens to this deep dive podcast 4 or even 5 times a week.
4 or 5 times. That is serious dedication. That's fantastic, Roland. Especially juggling it with being a national athlete. Really impressive.
He just wanted to write in and say he finds the podcast really great and that it's helping him a lot with his learning, and just wanted to say thanks.
Well, thank you, Roland, for reaching out. It's brilliant to hear about your basketball achievements. Truly inspiring.
Absolutely. And it's really rewarding for us to know that these deep dives are actually helping you on your journey. Listening multiple times like that shows real commitment.
We really appreciate you being such an avid listener, Roland. Keep up the amazing work, both on the court and with your English studies. We wish you all the very best.
We certainly do. And for anyone else listening who'd like to get in touch, you can always send us an email. The address is hello.dearthiago@gmail.com.
Or you can leave a voice message, which is always nice to hear. That's at speakpipe.com and English with Thiago. We love hearing from you all.
Definitely. And just a quick reminder, if you are looking for more structured support, do check out the paid options the source offers, the pronunciation course we mentioned.
Which covers that connected speech stuff in detail.
The private online community, where you can interact with other learners, including non-native speakers.
Great for that Lingua Franca practice.
And the Conversation Club for speaking practice. All the links are in the usual places description, pinned comment on YouTube, show notes.
Yeah, do check those out if you think they might be a good fit for you. Different ways to deepen your learning.
We'd be thrilled to welcome you as a student in one of those programs.
Absolutely.
And finally, if you enjoyed this deep dive and found it useful, we'd be so grateful if you could help us out.
How can people help?
Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Maybe give this video a like, leave a comment, tell us which tip you're going to try.
Yeah, we'd love to hear that.
And if you listen on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, a 5-star review really helps other learners discover the show.
It genuinely makes a big difference in visibility. So if you have a moment, we'd really appreciate it. Your support helps us keep doing this.
It really does. So thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into understanding native English speakers.
It's been a great discussion. Lots to think about and practice.
We will talk to you again very soon in the next one.
Until then, keep listening, keep practicing. Remember, your ears are getting better right now, at this very moment. Keep that in mind.